When you grow old, never choose this retirement option. It's truly worse than death. Welcome to Candle of Wisdom. As we grow older, planning for retirement becomes one of the most critical decisions of our lives. Yet some choices can lead to a life of regret, choices so harmful they feel worse than death itself. Today, I want to share a powerful story about an older man whose well-intentioned retirement plan turned into a nightmare. His experience will open your eyes and help you avoid making the same mistake. Stay with me until the end to learn why independence, not dependence, is the cornerstone of a peaceful and happy retirement. If you find this video helpful, please like, subscribe, and join our community for more valuable insights. For many older adults, the idea of living with family during retirement seems like the ideal solution. After all, isn't family supposed to be the ultimate support system? This was precisely the mindset of Mr. Robert, a 68-year-old retired tax accountant from Ohio. After working tirelessly for decades to support his two children, Robert looked forward to spending his golden years in the company of his family. His vision for retirement was simple: stay close to his children, enjoy time with his grandchildren, and receive the occasional help he might need as he aged. When Robert retired, he had a modest income from his Social Security checks and a small retirement savings. Though it wasn't a fortune, it was enough to cover his basic needs. After discussing his options with his children, he decided to split his time between his son and daughter's households. He thought this arrangement would not only bring the family closer, but also ensure that he wouldn't feel lonely or burdened by living alone. To ease the financial pressure on his children, Robert offered to contribute all of his Social Security income to the household expenses. He hoped this gesture would show his gratitude and commitment to being a helpful and supportive presence rather than a burden. At first, everything seemed to go well. His son and daughter-in-law welcomed him into their suburban home with warm smiles and reassurances that he was part of the family. Robert enjoyed the presence of his two energetic grandsons and was thrilled to participate in their daily lives. He felt that his years of hard work and sacrifice were finally paying off in the form of cherished family time. But beneath the surface, cracks were beginning to form in this seemingly perfect arrangement. It wasn't long before Robert began to notice subtle changes in the atmosphere at his son's home. What started as warm hospitality gradually shifted to a sense of obligation from his son and daughter-in-law. The first sign came when his daughter-in-law Jessica insisted on managing his finances. She reasoned that it would be more convenient for her to handle grocery shopping and household expenses. Trusting her intentions and wanting to avoid unnecessary conflict, Robert handed over his debit card and financial details. Soon, Robert's sense of independence began to erode. He had imagined contributing to the household would earn him respect and inclusion, but instead he found himself excluded from decisions about how his money was spent. Jessica became increasingly frugal, prioritizing the needs of her immediate family over his. Meals were often sparse, with the best cuts of meat and fresh fruit reserved for the children, while Robert was left with simple meals of canned soup or plain pasta. Jessica would dismiss his concerns, saying, "The kids are growing, they need the nutrition. You're an adult, you can manage with less." Privacy was another issue. Robert was given a pull-out couch in the living room as his sleeping space. While he tried to make the best of it, the lack of a private room was deeply unsettling. During the day, his bedding had to be folded and tucked away, leaving him feeling like a guest rather than a family member. At night, he was often disturbed by the sounds of family members moving through the house. He could hear his son watching television late into the evening, or his grandsons tiptoeing to the kitchen for midnight snacks. One day, while returning from a walk, Robert overheard a conversation between his son and Jessica that shattered his heart. Jessica was complaining about the added expenses since Robert had moved in. "He eats so much. Do you know how much more food we've had to buy? And he doesn't even help around the house the way I thought he would," she grumbled. Robert's son, trying to avoid conflict, remained silent. Standing outside the door, Robert felt tears welling up in his eyes. He had spent his entire life working tirelessly to provide for his children, and now, in his time of need, he felt like a burden. That night, as he lay on the pull-out couch staring at the ceiling, he resolved to leave. He couldn't bear to live in a place where he felt unwanted and undervalued. even if it was his own son's home. After 6 difficult months at his son's home, Robert decided it was time for a change. Hoping for a better experience, he packed his belongings and moved to his daughter Laura's home in Pennsylvania. Laura was a warm and compassionate woman who had always been close to her father. Her cheerful nature and reassuring words gave Robert a glimmer of hope. "Dad, you'll be so much more comfortable here," she said as she helped him settle in. "You deserve to be treated with love and respect." At first, life at Laura's home seemed like the fresh start Robert desperately needed. Unlike his previous experience, Laura didn't ask for his Social Security income or control his finances. She insisted that he keep his money for himself, saying, "Dad, you worked hard your whole life for this. It's yours to use however you want." Laura also went out of her way to make him feel welcome, setting up a cozy guest bedroom and ensuring he had his own space. Meals were a stark contrast to what he had endured at his son's home. Laura loved cooking and took pride in preparing hearty, nutritious meals for her family. She often invited Robert to join her in the kitchen, where they would share stories and laughs while chopping vegetables or stirring sauces. These moments reminded Robert of the bond they had shared when Laura was a child, and for the first time in months, he began to feel at peace. Even Laura's husband, Mike, treated Robert with respect and kindness. Despite his busy schedule, Mike always made time to sit with Robert in the evenings, sharing a beer or watching a football game. Robert appreciated Mike's easygoing demeanor and felt grateful to have a son-in-law who genuinely cared about his well-being. But as the weeks passed, small tensions began to surface. While Laura treated her father with love and respect, her teenage daughter Emily didn't share the same sentiment. Emily, like many teenagers, was fiercely independent and sometimes resentful of the extra responsibilities that came with having her grandfather in the house. One morning, Robert overheard Emily talking to her mother in frustration. "Why is Grandpa even living with us? Doesn't Uncle Mark have a bigger house? Why can't he stay there instead?" Laura, visibly upset by her daughter's attitude, scolded her. "Emily, this is your grandfather. He sacrificed so much for our family. We're lucky to have him here." The heated conversation ended abruptly, but the tension lingered in the air. The situation took a turn for the worse a few days later when Emily, still upset, refused to go to school. The family spent hours searching for her, eventually finding her at a friend's house. Although Emily eventually apologized, the incident left Robert feeling like his presence was causing unnecessary stress on Laura's family. Despite Laura's reassurances, Robert couldn't shake the feeling that he was intruding. These moments weighed heavily on Robert. He began to wonder if there was any place where he truly belonged. No matter where he went, he felt like an outsider, an obligation rather than a cherished member of the family. This realization led him to make a bold decision. After months of feeling like a guest in his children's homes, Robert made the difficult decision to return to his own house. The journey back wasn't just physical, it was emotional, as it symbolized his reclaiming of autonomy and self-worth. His modest, single-story home in Ohio had been left untouched since he first moved out. Dust had settled on the furniture, and the air carried a faint sense of abandonment. But to Robert, it felt like a sanctuary. The first few days were challenging. Robert had grown accustomed to the noise and activity of his children's homes, and the silence of his house was almost deafening. Yet as he unpacked his belongings and reorganized his space, he began to rediscover the comforts of solitude. He hung family photos on the walls, set up his favorite recliner by the window, and stocked the kitchen with food he actually enjoyed eating. It was a slow process, but with every small step, the house began to feel like home again. One of the first things Robert did was regain control of his finances. He cancelled the joint bank account he had set up with his son and transferred his funds back into his personal account. The act, while simple, was deeply empowering. For the first time in months, he felt the freedom to make his own decisions without needing approval from anyone else. He set a budget for groceries, utilities, and other essentials, ensuring he could live comfortably while still saving a portion of his income for emergencies. Physical independence also became a priority. Recognizing the importance of staying active, Robert made a commitment to exercise regularly. Each morning, he went for a brisk walk around his neighborhood, greeting familiar faces and enjoying the fresh air. He even joined a local senior center, where he participated in yoga classes and socialized with peers. These activities not only improved his physical health, but also gave him a sense of community and belonging. Robert also took steps to prepare for future challenges. He installed a medical alert system in case of emergencies and ensured his home was safe and accessible. He rearranged furniture to prevent falls, added grab bars in the bathroom, and kept his phone within easy reach at all times. These adjustments gave him peace of mind, knowing he could handle most situations on his own. Emotionally, returning to independence brought a profound sense of relief. Robert reflected on his experiences and realized that while his children loved him, their lives were busy and filled with their own responsibilities. Expecting them to shoulder the burden of his care had unintentionally strained their relationships. Living on his own allowed him to preserve those bonds without placing undue pressure on his family. One afternoon, while sitting on his porch and sipping a cup of coffee, Robert thought back to the feelings of helplessness he had experienced while living with his son and daughter. "This is what I was missing," he thought, "the freedom to live life on my terms without being a burden to anyone." For the first time in years, he felt a sense of pride in his independence and a renewed appreciation for the life he had built. Robert's story serves as a reminder that independence is not just about managing physical needs. It's about maintaining dignity, self-respect, and control over one's life. Returning to his own home allowed him to reclaim all of these and gave him a sense of purpose and peace in his later years. Returning to his own home gave Robert the space to reflect deeply on the choices he had made and the lessons he learned. Living with his children had opened his eyes to the complexities of relying on family for care in old age. While the idea of familial support seemed ideal in theory, the reality was far more nuanced. It wasn't that his children didn't love him, they did, but their lives were already filled with responsibilities, financial pressures, and their own family dynamics. Adding his care to the mix had unintentionally strained their resources and relationships. Robert began to understand that his role as a parent had shifted. In his younger years, he was the provider and protector, always prioritizing his children's needs above his own. But now, as they had grown into adults with families of their own, the dynamic had changed. His children were no longer looking to him for guidance or support. Instead, they were focused on building their own lives. One of the most painful realizations was that his presence, while well-intentioned, had sometimes felt like an obligation to his children. He recalled the strained smiles and awkward silences at the dinner table, the whispered arguments between his son and daughter-in-law, and the occasional outbursts from his teenage granddaughter. These moments left him feeling like a burden, even when no one said it outright. Robert also recognized that financial reliance had played a significant role in his experiences. By giving his Social Security income to his children, he thought he was alleviating their financial stress, but in reality, it had created a power imbalance. Without control over his own money, he had unintentionally given up his autonomy, making it harder to advocate for himself when his needs weren't being met. This reflection led Robert to a profound conclusion. Independence was not just a practical necessity, it was a form of self-respect. By relying solely on his children, he had placed unrealistic expectations on their ability to care for him in a way that was both compassionate and sustainable. Moving back to his own home allowed him to regain control over his life and redefine what aging with dignity looked like. Robert's return to independence taught him a critical lesson. Planning for old age is not something that can be left to chance. As he settled back into his own home, he began to realize the importance of preparing for the challenges that inevitably come with aging. He reflected on how his earlier decisions had placed him in vulnerable situations and vowed to take control of his future. One of the first steps Robert took was to reassess his financial situation. He set up a dedicated savings account specifically for emergencies and personal care needs. Drawing from his experiences, he understood the importance of having a financial safety net that would allow him to make decisions without depending on others. He also explored ways to stretch his retirement income, researching affordable meal plans, energy-efficient appliances, and senior discounts at local stores. These small but meaningful adjustments helped him feel more secure about his ability to manage his expenses. Robert also recognized the need for practical preparations. While he was still in relatively good health, he knew that mobility and accessibility could become concerns in the future. To address this, he made several modifications to his home, such as installing grab bars in the bathroom, replacing rugs with non-slip mats, and ensuring that essential items were within easy reach. He even converted a small bedroom on the first floor into his main living space to avoid relying on stairs. Beyond financial and physical preparations, Robert began to consider how to maintain his emotional well-being. He understood that living alone could sometimes feel isolating, so he took proactive steps to build a support network. He joined a local senior community center where he could participate in activities like book clubs, fitness classes, and group outings. This not only helped him stay active, but also provided him with a sense of connection and purpose. Another key aspect of his planning was addressing potential healthcare needs. Robert researched local healthcare services and signed up for a medical alert system that could provide immediate assistance in an emergency. He also established a relationship with a primary care physician who specialized in geriatric health, ensuring he had access to regular checkups and guidance on maintaining his health as he aged. Through this process, Robert began to feel a renewed sense of empowerment. He realized that while aging brought certain challenges, it also offered opportunities for growth and self-discovery. By taking charge of his own life, he was able to shift his perspective from one of dependence to one of resilience. He no longer saw aging as something to fear, but as a phase of life that could be navigated with dignity and confidence. As Robert reflected on his experiences, he realized that the relationships within his family were more complex than he had anticipated, particularly with his in-laws. He had always believed that his bond with his son and daughter would naturally extend to their spouses, creating a harmonious family dynamic. However, living in close quarters revealed the underlying challenges of maintaining healthy relationships with his children's partners. At his son's home, Robert struggled to connect with Jessica, his daughter-in-law. While she initially appeared accommodating, her subtle frustrations began to surface as time went on. Jessica was managing a busy household, raising 2 children, and balancing her own career, leaving her with little patience for the added responsibility of caring for an elderly family member. Though she never explicitly voiced her displeasure to Robert, her actions, such as taking control of his finances without consulting him or dismissing his dietary preferences, spoke volumes. Robert recognized that Jessica's behavior wasn't entirely rooted in malice. She was a product of her circumstances, juggling numerous responsibilities and likely feeling overwhelmed. Yet, her inability to express her concerns constructively led to resentment on both sides. Robert began to see that in-laws often have different perspectives on familial obligations, shaped by their upbringing, values, and personal experiences. What might seem like a natural duty to one person could feel like an unfair burden to another. The dynamic at Laura's home was different, but equally challenging. Laura's husband, Mike, was polite and accommodating, but he maintained a certain distance from Robert. While this approach helped avoid conflict, it also made Robert feel like an outsider in his daughter's family. Robert appreciated Mike's efforts to be respectful, but he longed for a deeper connection. A shared understanding that he wasn't just Laura's father, but a part of their family unit. Interactions with his teenage granddaughter, Emily, further highlighted the generational and cultural differences that shaped family dynamics. Emily's frustrations, though hurtful, reflected a broader reality. Younger family members often struggle to understand the needs and experiences of older adults. Robert realized that expecting empathy and understanding without fostering meaningful relationships was unrealistic. He had to find ways to bridge the gap, rather than assuming those bonds would naturally exist. Through these experiences, Robert learned that managing relationships with in-laws required a delicate balance of respect, boundaries, and communication. He couldn't change how others perceived him, but he could adjust his own approach. Instead of expecting his in-laws to meet him halfway, Robert began to focus on maintaining his independence and minimizing his impact on their lives. He also resolved to express gratitude for even small gestures of kindness, recognizing that appreciation could go a long way in easing tensions. One of the most profound lessons Robert learned was the importance of maintaining boundaries. Living with his children had blurred the lines between parent and guest, leading to confusion about roles and expectations. By choosing to live independently, Robert redefined those boundaries, allowing his relationships with his children and in-laws to evolve naturally. This shift reduced the pressure on everyone involved, creating space for more genuine and positive interactions. Robert's experiences with his in-laws taught him that family dynamics are not static. They require constant effort, understanding, and adjustment. By stepping back and focusing on his own well-being, he found that he could navigate these relationships with greater patience and clarity. He no longer sought approval or validation from his children's spouses. Instead, he valued mutual respect and the freedom to live his life on his terms. Robert's journey back to independence wasn't just about reclaiming his physical space. It was also about developing practical strategies to ensure a sustainable, self-reliant lifestyle. He understood that aging came with its own set of challenges, but with careful planning and thoughtful decisions, he could create a life where he remained in control. This realization was not only liberating, but also gave him a sense of purpose in his later years. One of the first things Robert focused on was securing his financial stability. He knew that depending on others for money had made him feel powerless, so he took steps to protect his finances. He set up automated bill payments and created a detailed monthly budget to track his spending. By doing this, he ensured that every dollar he received from Social Security and his small pension was used wisely. He also began contributing to an emergency savings account, giving him peace of mind, knowing he had funds available for unexpected situations. Robert also prioritized his health, recognizing that staying physically and mentally active was key to remaining independent. He joined a senior fitness group that offered low-impact exercises tailored to older adults, such as yoga and Tai Chi. These activities not only kept his body strong, but also improved his balance and coordination, reducing the risk of falls. Additionally, he explored hobbies that challenged his mind, like crossword puzzles and learning to play the guitar, which kept him mentally sharp and gave him a sense of accomplishment. Another critical step Robert took was building a support network. While he valued his independence, he also recognized the importance of having people he could rely on in case of emergencies. He reached out to neighbors and reconnected with old friends, creating a small but dependable circle of support. Joining a local community center allowed him to make new friends who shared similar interests and experiences. These connections helped him feel less isolated and provided emotional support when he needed it most. Robert also made practical modifications to his home to ensure it remained safe and comfortable. He installed motion sensor lights in hallways, grab bars in the bathroom, and an easy-to-use medical alert system. These changes gave him the confidence to live independently, knowing he had taken precautions to handle potential risks. Through these steps, Robert built a life where he could age with dignity and freedom. He realized that true independence came not from rejecting help entirely, but from thoughtfully preparing for the future, allowing him to live on his own terms. In closing, Robert's journey taught him that independence is the foundation of a fulfilling old age. While family can offer love and support, true peace comes from being prepared and self-reliant. By reclaiming his autonomy, Robert not only preserved his dignity, but also improved his relationships with his children, free from the tensions of dependency. Aging is inevitable, but how we choose to face it defines the quality of our later years. Robert's story reminds us to plan wisely, prioritize our well-being, and embrace the freedom to live life on our own terms. Let his experience inspire you to take control of your future, ensuring that your golden years are truly your own.